Hi, and welcome back to another tutorial video based on OCR's AS Media Studies syllabus. Today we're looking at the final key concept, that is institutions. Institutions is examined in section B of the exam, but it is important to stress that it's always considered in conjunction with the key concept of audiences. They go together like fish and chips, and any question in section B will expect you to discuss both of them together, generally requiring you to explain the relationship between the two within a specific context which will be defined for you by the question that is asked. But we'll be looking at specific exam questions in later tutorials. What is important for you to understand is the nature and role of the institutions that produce, distribute and exhibit or exchange media products, in our case films. By exchange I simply mean DVD sales, Blu-ray sales, cable or online streaming. Now, these institutions are all around us and they have their fingers in many different pies. So, the BBC is one example. A producer, distributor of film, TV and online content, which it also exhibits through its website. Likewise, Film 4 is another one. It has its own television channel which showcases its movies and the films that it distributes if it hasn't actually produced them themselves. Then there's the curious case of a company like Working Title Films, once an independently owned British production company but now owned by Universal Studios, which is itself owned by a multinational called Comcast and General Electric, which own it in a joint venture. General Electric and Comcast are not alone in being a giant multinational conglomerate that controls many other business entities. Rupert Murdoch's News International, as well as owning numerous newspapers around the world, also owns the Fox network and Fox Studios, known in the old days of the studio system as 20th Century Fox. These kinds of institutions are incredibly powerful, and because of the vast sums of money at stake, control every aspect of their output with military precision. But increasingly, they are not the only show in town. There have always been smaller producers of media content, especially films, the so-called independents. But with the advances in digital technology in the last few years, their ranks have swollen. Now basically anyone can make a feature film with a decent high-def camcorder and editing software. Those who are doing so can also now be reasonably referred to as institutions in their own right. And it is true that there have always been relentlessly obsessive low-budget filmmakers who have always found ways to get their stories told, even when it was relatively expensive to do so. But getting the film produced was never really the issue. Getting it seen was. In order for people to see your film in the past, you had to get it distributed. Literally, you had to have the money to send heavy film cans to a cinema that would show or exhibit it. Until the 1950s, the Hollywood studios had this whole process sewn up in a business model which was given the name vertical integration. The way this worked was that they owned and controlled every step of the process. So a Warner Brothers film was made in their studio with crew and cast contracted to them, owned by them. Then it was distributed through their network in vans and trucks owned by them, and then screened in their own cinemas. So every single penny went straight back into the company. This system has survived in one form or another since the heyday of the studio system. But in the last few years, digital technology has posed a threat to it. Why? Well, because digital technology means that anyone can do what the studios used to do, but for a fraction of the cost and considerably less hassle. This output from entrepreneurial low-budget producers with the newly accessible distribution platforms available to them and the possibilities for exhibition may present the greatest threat to the film business since the advent of television. The idea goes that if you can make your own films, you can distribute them yourself. If you have a decent product, you might even get a cinema to screen it. And what with no heavy cans to lift or ship around the country, most cinemas now have digital projection systems that can read films as files. So now there's the potential for small producers or institutions, if you will, to break this monopoly that major film producers have had over the distribution and exhibition networks for such a long, long time. It's a revolutionary idea. Is it feasible? Well, only time will tell. Big business usually has a way of surviving change, and American film business has been particularly good at adapting. First there was sound, then there was colour, then there was TV. They survived video, they survived DVD, they survived the internet. How long will they last? It's hard to tell. But the truth is, it's an exciting time, and your media coursework is all part of the puzzle, because it'll be produced, distributed, and exhibited by your own means for basically nothing. You'll engage in all the institutional practices mentioned above. The question you'll answer in section B of the paper will focus on some, though possibly all of these ideas. A couple of the questions can be very broad, and consequently you'll not be able to go into too much detail, but you'll have to know an awful lot. You'll need to be able to discuss the similarities and the differences in the institutional practices of large and small producers of media. You'll need to reference at least 2 case studies, one identifying a film produced by a major Hollywood studio, the other a smaller entity, British in origin, and you'll need to be able to comment on how these institutional practices are being shaped, for better or worse, by digital technology. For example, the possibility that a low-budget British film that once may have screened in one cinema in Soho now might feasibly be seen across the world is due solely to the ability for that film to be distributed digitally. There is no physical product to shift. Therefore, it can be done without a huge investment of capital. All you've got to do is be able to do all of the above efficiently in 45 minutes using the correct terminology, appropriate examples, and providing adequate analysis, and you should produce an A-grade essay. This is the final of our introductory tutorials looking at OCR Media Studies AS. Further tutorials in this series will go into considerably more detail about individual areas of the course. Thanks for listening.